My name is Mark. This is Zen Talk, and we are talking about the Zen Precepts Decoded. Alright, so what are the precepts? Well, in short, they are a disciples' community code of ethics. Some of these communities have additional rules of behavior that monastic monks and nuns may adhere to. For example, in the Theravada tradition, there are 227 monastic rules. The Tibetan monks follow 253 rules. Zen monks follow the 10 bodhisattva precepts that supersede the monastic rules. So in contrast, Christians follow the 10 commandments, though there may be additional rules or church rules beyond that. And the Jewish tradition follows the 613 commandments of the Old Testament. Where did the precepts come from? They come from the Brahmajala Sutra. The original precepts come from the Brahmajala Sutra, also called the Brahma's Net Sutra. The sutra is also in the Theravada Vinaya, which is the code of ethics for the Theravada monks. In this sutra, introduces Vairocana, the Buddha of the unborn, the undying, also known as the Buddha of the emptiness and the void, and his relationship to Gautama Buddha. It also states the 10 major precepts for the Bodhisattva and the 48 minor precepts to follow to advance along the Bodhisattva path. This video, though, will only be talking about the 10 precepts. And let's take a note here. The precepts of the Brahmajala Sutra are for those who take the Bodhisattva vows, and for the ordained monks and nuns. Generally, the laity, those that come and listen, are not holden to the precepts. Or sometimes they only may take a few of them, depending upon their position in life. So who takes the precepts? Well, anyone can become a disciple of the Buddha, sometimes called the bhikkhu, by simply standing up before the assembly and taking the first 5 precepts, and by doing such one becomes an ordained disciple of the Buddha. The later 5 precepts are aspirational and tend to be recited before meditation, when commencing a meditation retreat, or in an intensive like Rahatsu, which is a 7-day event. In Japan, this ceremony is called Jukai, and this is the ritual intra-ceremony that Zen disciples who become monks takes, and they receive a Dharma name. To make it clear, in Zen, as in most Buddhist traditions, once you take the precepts, you are an ordained member of the Sangha. Those that wish to live a monastic life, cloistered or in poverty, to receive alms, is their choice. However, one must adhere to the precepts to remain a member in good standing in the Sangha. In my investigation of the precepts, in comparing the common English version of the 10 precepts and the Brahmajala Sutra, where the precepts are derived from, I noticed that the precepts were divided up into 2 sections. The Zen precepts are also very abbreviated and compact and cryptic and written in a ceremonial short of tone and authority. When we look at the precepts and how they are to be read, we see them in a very different light and in a much more realistic way. The first 5 precepts are about the types of activities people may engage in to gain money, and those ways tend to create havoc or generally bring hateful attention to those who engage in them. The last 5 are about qualities of a person must uphold to be considered righteous and upstanding in society. So before we start looking at going into the precepts, I'm just going to tell you what I had to do here. I had to go to the Brahmajala Sutra in Chinese, and I would take the original Chinese and go through various translation sites and programs to start to really pick apart what exactly was being said. And then I would take the Chinese precept and paste it into Google and come up with quite an extensive list of other Chinese sites and documents talking about the precept. And I started to notice some very interesting things, that a lot of the precepts were not talking about what we in the West commonly think they are. So then I started to really look at the words and the way that and also the Chinese words in the various translations, and I came up with, I would say, a more realistic set of precepts that were probably derived upon the times of when they were created. And we also have to realize that when these precepts in the Buddhist community came about, much of the lands were in a feudal state. Populations were small. There were cities, but in between the cities there were tracts of nothing, wilderness, deserts. So there tended to be a lot of pockets of civilization and then pockets of chaos. Or I would say pockets of civilization surrounded by seas of chaos. So when I was looking at the precepts, I started to realize that these precepts were not talking about what we commonly think they're talking about. So let's go ahead and look at the first one here, because once you start to see how the first one lays out, the rest of them become pretty apparent. So the first one generally is, to not kill, which is an extremely compact and abbreviated precept that is often just in a ceremonial form. But let's unpack it, let's decrypt it, and really go down to about what is this really talking about. So in this particular, I have a passage here which is more or less accepted as the authentic passage of the sutra, that a disciple of the Buddha shall not kill himself, encourage others to kill by expedient means, praise killing, rejoice at the witness killing, or killing through incantation or deviant means. He must not create the cause, condition, method, or karma of killing, and shall not intentionally kill any living creature for these reasons. As a Buddha's disciple, he ought to nurture a mind of compassion and filial piety, which means reverence to parents. Also, devising expedient means to rescue and protect all sentient beings. If instead he fails to restrain himself and kill sentient beings without mercy, he commits a major offense. So many people interpret this precept to be one of pacifism and vegetarianism, thus titled No Killing. However, in reading the original Chinese Brahmahala Sutra, we gain clarity that this precept is about cruelty, the lust for killing, as in being a brigand, and killing as a means to control sentient beings and extorting them for money. Nowhere in the sutra or the Buddhist canon is it forbidden to eat meat, defend oneself, your family, or your community. So when I was looking at this sutra, this particular passage in Chinese, it pretty much is talking about using killing, violence, the threat of killing as a means of survival. And the first precept can be kind of taught, the precept of brigandage. And a brigandage is being a gang member. People join gangs, and what do gangs do? They rove the cities or the highways, and they kill, they extort, they threaten to kill, and people pay them money so that they leave them alone. So obviously, if you were to have a person as a Buddhist disciple that was in a gang, you would be attracting a unwanted association with that. You would be associating the Buddha's teachings with a gang of killing. So the first precept, maybe in more of a modern terms, can be called no gang, or you cannot belong to a gang. The second precept, oftenly titled as no stealing or no theft, is mostly along the same lines of no brigandage. A disciple of the Buddha must not himself steal or encourage others to steal, or steal by expedient means, or steal by means of incantation or deviant mantras. He should not create causes, conditions, methods, or karma of stealing. No valuables or possessions, even those belonging to ghosts or spirits, or thieves and robbers, be they as small as a needle or blade of grass, may be stolen. As a Buddha's disciple, he ought to have a mind of mercy, compassion, filial piety, and always help people earn merits and achieve happiness. If instead he steals the possession of others, he commits a major offense. So, taking from others that which is not freely given is universally considered evil action. In reading the Chinese Brahmala Sutra, we find that this precept is about piracy, thieving rings, and kleptocracy, which is you're part of a ruling government that steals from people. Or once again, a gang. Again, this precept is saying you cannot join the Thieves Guild. You cannot join a ring of thieves. You cannot be a pirate. You cannot steal for a living here. This is what this is saying. Because again, you would be associating Buddhism, the Buddhist disciples, with this kind of activity. And it's a hateful activity. Just like being in a gang is a hateful activity. Being in a thieving ring is a hateful activity. You're drawing undue attention to the Buddha's teachings, to the Buddhist community. And it's also, in a lot of this world, you're guilty by association. So, when the townspeople rise up because you have thieves in your midst, and they come to take retribution on the thieves and the gang members that are sitting in your discipleship community, they don't care if only one or two of them are guilty. They go after and they pick up everybody. You're guilty by association, and more or less everybody's going to hang by the rope, even those that did not do any of the thieving and the gang activity. So this starts to make a lot of sense, that we're not talking about particular evil actions. We're talking about more of a class of person: the gang member, the thief. The next one's the prostitute. So in this one here, generally it's to not engage in litigious actions, or sometimes it's called lewdness. And it kind of states this, that a disciple of the Buddha must not engage in litigious acts or encourage others to do so. He should not have sexual relationships with a female, if she's a human, animal, deity, or spirit, or create the causes and conditions or methods of karma of such misconduct. Indeed, it must not be encouraged as improper sexual conduct with anyone. A Buddhist disciple ought to have the mind of filial piety, rescuing all sentient beings and instructing them in the Dharma and purity and chastity. If instead he lacks compassion and encourage others to engage in sexual relations, promiscuity, including with animals and even their mothers, daughters, sisters, and other close relatives, he commits a major offense. So this is a very murkily translated. The subject is often influenced by the politics of the time and the locality. But when I was reading the original Chinese sutra, we clearly see that this precept is about prostitution, and that women who are Buddha's disciples shall not engage in the practice of prostitution, and men who are disciples shall not have sexual relations with prostitutes. Furthermore, the disciples shall not run prostitution rings, teach prostitution, or engage in any sexual deprivations, masturbations, or various sexual fetishes, or bestiality. So in short, the disciples are not to profit from the manners of prostitution or sexual degeneracy in any manner. So in Japan, this precept is pretty much interpreted to not turn the temple into a brothel, and ordained females are not allowed to use prostitution as a means to gain alms. And again, when we look at this in light of the other two, to not be a brigand, to not be a pirate, to not be a prostitute or a pimp, because again, this can be seen as a hateful action. When you associate with prostitutes, even though there may be one or two among you, the general population, again, you are guilty by association, and people start to wonder, well, if you're accepting prostitutes, what else are you accepting? And it's also more of a stern commandment to the disciples to not run prostitution rings, to not go down those roads. We know of, I believe it was the gypsies of ancient Europe did that, and they kind of became a despised group of people. They allowed thieves and brigands and pirates within their midst as well, and they gained a rather notorious reputation about them, which I'm sure is all completely unwanted and was not who they are. However, as we have seen in that particular saga of history, you are guilty by association. When you have people in your community who are engaging in behaviors to make money that are considered hateful by the general public, again, you incur the wrath of the general public, even though you were just a bystander and did not engage in any of those. You were sitting with them. So there was that. This one here, the fourth precept, is often the precept about not lying. But let's go through this carefully. This may shock you. So, a disciple of the Buddha must not himself use false words or speech, or encourage others to lie or lie by expedient means. He should not involve himself in the causes, conditions, methods, or karma of lying, saying that he was seen what he has not seen, or vice versa, or lying implicitly through physical or mental means. A Buddhist disciple ought to remain, right speech, right views always, and lead others to maintain them as well. So again, if he, causes wrong speech or wrong views, he commits an offense. This precept is awfully grossly interpreted as do not lie in any circumstances. However, this is not the case. And looking at the original Chinese, we clearly find that this is the disciples are not to speak presumptuously, about things they don't know. And that is to say things they have no knowledge about in regards to the teachings of Buddha, or also speak false teachings of the Buddha, or encourage others to do so. So this precept, when I was looking at it, I'm like, what are we really talking about here? Because if the other first three, don't be a gang member, don't be a pirate, don't be a prostitute, those are positions where people gain, they do this for money, then where do you lie to gain money? Well, the only place that you lie or are being presumptuous, talking about things you don't know, or using false words in speech, is by being a thespian. And thespians, or a troupe of thespians, is a very time-honored tradition going back thousands of years, where people would take on roles, position, in a theater troupe, or acting, and this could be anywhere. This could be on small stages, in parks. It could be just in the middle of the street. You could put on a show. So the thespian, though they are not despised, so in the medieval world, the thespian, we call them the street performer today, would say things and do things for money. They would put a show on. A lot of times people would dress up as ancient, characters, go out in the streets, and start citing poetry or speaking from the writings of famous people. So to associate with thespians as a Buddhist disciple, you are bringing this sort of thespian, unreal falseness to your own teachings, where people, one day the thespian is dressing up as an old emperor and saying silly things in the street and people are paying him money, but then they see him over in another section of the city teaching the words of the Buddha. The general public isn't going to be able to discern which is which. So now the thespian is bringing this theater, the world of lies, to Buddhism. So in one area he's still the monk, he's still the Buddhist disciple. Maybe he has the shaved head and robes, but he's over here saying one thing to gain money, but then over here he's saying another thing and calling it the truth. Well, can people really make the difference between the two? The answer is no. So when I was really looking at this, it just dawned on me that we're talking about thespianism. And I would also say that there could be a degree of acting within the Buddhist community. People can act as if they're enlightened, or people can act as if they are the teacher or they understand. I have seen that plenty of times within the Buddhist centers where people, they used to call it fake it till you make it, and all they ended up doing was being good at faking. These are qualities that are not wanted in Buddhist discipleship, to act, to be phony, to lie about yourself, to lie about who you are, where you come from. And this world of lies that a person creates is called thespianism. They create a story, a narrative about themselves, and then act it out. And then we can probably see that when you're associating with such people that are known to do this, to enter the world of lies and act them out for money or fame and fortune, that associating with these people and in this environment as a Buddhist disciple is going to bring a lot of confusion to who it is that you are too. Because if you're sitting and associating with such thespians, then people are going to assume that you're a thespian and that everything you're saying is part of the thespianism, thus the world of lies. So the fifth precept is another interesting one. This is the precept of the vintner. A disciple of the Buddha must not trade in alcohol beverages or encourage others to do so. He should not create causes, conditions, methods, or karma of selling any intoxicants whatsoever. For intoxicants are the cause and conditions of all kinds of offenses. As a Buddhist disciple, he ought to help all sentient beings achieve clear wisdom. If instead he has them, to have an upside-down, topsy-turvy thinking, he creates a major offense. So again, this precept is murkily interpreted and subjected to politics of the times. But in looking at the original Chinese sutra, it's more clarity is gained, in that this precept is saying to the disciples are not to engage in drunkenness or encourage others to be drunken, or encourage drunkenness as the teachings of the Buddha. I've seen this where people will drink wine, a sacramental drinking of wine, and achieve drunkenness as part of a religious ceremony for other paths. So just as the disciples are not to turn the temple into a brothel, they are not to turn the temple into a beer hall as a vintner. In recent times, the fifth precept forbids the use of psychedelics and intoxicants as a means of spiritual practice and enlightenment or attainment. And such use is considered false meditation or false enlightenment, and those who have engaged in such practices cannot be considered the disciples of the Buddha. So I'm going the precept of the vintner, and the vintner is a dealer of wine. And when I was really cutting and copying the original Chinese and doing searches in the original Chinese, a lot of time, wine dealer, the vintner kept coming up over and over and over again. and it started to realize that the fifth precept is not necessarily about do not take intoxicants, do not drink. It's more of do not present Buddhism as a drinking religion. There were drinking religions, or passive drinking in ancient China, and even in the West. There were organizations that would drink heavily as part of their spiritual attainments. So when they say do not be the vintner, which is do not offer wine, do not engage in drunkenness, you're not turning your discipleship into a drinking club. Like I say down here, you're not turning your temple into a beer hall. And this is something that, again, it's not necessarily a hateful thing, but you're associating now the teachings of Buddha with drunkenness, or you're associating the teachings of the Dharma with a drunkenness state of mind. In recent times, there's been a lot of discussion of the use of marijuana, and a lot of young men are assuming that smoking marijuana is permitted within Buddhism. I have to tell them it's not, that it is considered false meditation, false enlightenment, and that it is the same thing as the fifth precept, the precept against the vintner, and that I cannot associate with such people that insist that there's no problem, no harm with smoking marijuana. And I tell them, well, you can certainly smoke it and call it what you want to call it, but I cannot call you a disciple of the Buddha. And this causes a lot of emotions, obviously, to come up with young men and sometimes women, who are engaged in this. They don't understand. They don't understand why they cannot smoke and still be considered a disciple of the Buddha. And, the fifth precept, I'm going now back to the precept of the vintner. It's really saying, well, look, it's like if you want to smoke, and that's your own thing. I'm not telling you can't. But within the community, you want to stand up in the community and be called a disciple, a monk of the way, and engage in this kind of behavior. That's a major offense. I don't think there's going to be any community that's going to have you for long in their community while you're doing that. Okay, so that is the 5 precepts that are generally given in Jukai. You take the 5 precepts, that do not kill, do not steal, do not engage in prostitution, do not use false words, thespianism, and do not be a vintner or trade and sell alcohol beverages. Those are the 5 precepts. You take the 5 precepts, you are a ordained monk of the way, and you're part of the community. If you choose to engage in any of these major offenses, you will be thrown out of the community. And then when you choose to not do those particular actions, you can come back to the community, maybe. So the next 5 precepts, I kind of tend these to be more of aspirational precepts. These are not necessarily given in Jukai. They are oftentimes recited before meditation or before a meditation retreat, especially if you're going into a meditation intensive. Maybe in a more formal and longer ceremony, a transmission ceremony, or a ceremony of becoming the leader of the community, you may recite these further precepts. So the 6th precept is that of bravery, which is often commented as to not broadcast misdeeds or faults, and we'll talk about how I got to this position in a little bit here. So a disciple of the Buddha must not dwell on the 5 cardinal offenses or the 4 grave offenses of the bodhisattvas, or encourage others to do so. He must not create the cause and conditions and methods. He must not create the causes, conditions, and methods or karma of dwelling on the offenses of the assembly. As a Buddhist disciple, whenever he hears laymen or other ordained monks saying that the Buddha's teachings are illegal, that the disciple should instruct them with compassionate mind and lead them to develop a wholesome faith in the Mahayana. And if instead he doesn't do that, he commits an offense. So this precept is very, very crudely interpreted as do not defame the Sangha. Or as I said here, do not broadcast misdeeds of the Sangha. And it can be used to hide and squelch the misdeeds of teachers and the followers of the teacher, which often happens. But in looking at the original Chinese sutra, more clarity is gained as to the true nature of the precept, and that the disciple is not. The disciple is not to harbor or obsess of the offenses or potential offenses of others, or allow others in the community to justify the 5 cardinal, there's the 5 cardinal offenses or the 4 grave offenses as righteous and legal. So basically this precept is about fear, cowardice, and not defending one's ground. So be brave, as I would say. But a lot of times when I was looking at these latter precepts, they were more of a authoritative, condescending view. Do not be a coward. And started to realize, when it was like, if I'm what is it when you're dwelling? You're dwelling on the 4 grave offenses, and the 5 major cardinal offenses are things like killing your parents, killing a Buddha, harming a Buddha, or causing a schism. And the 4 grave offenses are the first 4 precepts there. Being a brigand, being a thief, or a pirate, being a prostitute. Those are the things that are the 4 grave offenses. Apparently, being a vintner is not that bad, but it's still an offense. So, as a Buddha's disciple, when he hears laymen and bhikkhus, saying the teachings are illegal, in what universe would the teachings of the Buddha be illegal? Well, if the other monks or other ordained people were maybe in the past, oh man, that man over there in the past, he was a pirate, or that, oh man, that woman over there, she used to be the greatest whore of so and so. This is where they're saying, look, you stand up to these people and you tell them that, hey, I'm going to instruct you with a compassionate mind and wholesomeness in the faith of the Mahayana. That you're basically being asked to be brave, to stand up to people who were saying things, about the Buddhist teachings. Oh yeah, that group over there, those Buddhists, all they are is a collection of brigands, pirates, and whores. And this is where you would stand up and say, no, these are people who have seen their misdeeds, who have changed their way, are now disciples of the Buddha, and they no longer follow those ways. In fact, they have taken vows to never do those again. So when people would hear this, they would be like, what? Can you actually do that? And it may encourage them to even rethink Buddhism, or even consider maybe this is something they should do themselves. This is what I call being brave. And so this precept, when they say it's do not defame the Sangha, which is do not speak badly about the Sangha. Do not say, oh yeah, this guy over here, he used to be the dread Pirate Roberts, and now he's a Buddhist disciple. Whoa, how can I deal with this? He killed hundreds of men and murdered people and did terrible things, and now he's in my community. Even though he says he doesn't do those things, how can I be sure of what's going on here? Or I have famous courtesans now over here. What do I do with that? Or this person here was known as a thespian, and now, he used to be the greatest, and people are wondering, are we a thespian troupe? So this is where you stand up and you say, no, I'm not going to dwell on these things. I'm not going to say that because these things happen, or these things could happen. People slip, people fall, people are not perfect. And, sometimes people resort back to old ways as expedient means. Somebody once said, once a thief, always a thief. And, let's say that, you have somebody that's what they did. And, they were a thief, and then things happen and they were caught thieving again. And this is where you are asked to be brave, to stand up and defend your Sangha, and speak the truth of the Buddha. So these are the Buddhist sins. The 5 major cardinal offenses within the Buddhism are, to intentionally kill one's father, intentionally kill one's mothers, to killing an arhat or Buddha, any fully enlightened being, shedding the blood of a Buddha, and creating a schism within the Sangha. So the 4 grave offenses would be, being a brigand or rejoining a gang, being a prostitute or becoming a prostitute again, becoming a pirate again, or in this one here would say would be, going back out and becoming a thespian again. People may even use you, hey, you're part of that Buddhist community. Come over here and pretend to be the Buddha. We're going to make a play about the Buddha. So this would be more of what's going on here. So the 7th precept, and this is what I call the precept of resignation, which is basically saying to not praise oneself or speak ill of others. So a disciple of the Buddha shall not praise himself or speak ill of others or encourage others to do so. He must not create the causes, conditions, methods of karma, or karma of praising himself and disparaging others. As a disciple of the Buddha, he should be willing to stand in for all sentient beings and endure humiliation and slander, accepting blame and letting sentient beings have all the glory. If instead he displays his own virtues and conceals the good points of others, thus he creates a major offense. And so this precept kind of appears to correspond with the 6th precept, but yet in a closer examination of the original Chinese sutra, we clearly see this precept is speaking to the aspect of resignation, and for not flouting their discipleship or claiming of being persecuted for being a disciple in the lands where such may be illegal or ridiculed. So you resign to not hold a position, posture, or notion over a thing, person, or situation. Sometimes this is also called the precept of don't pushing down others to make yourself look tall. So this precept of resignation, if you really look at this, when you're, who praises themselves? And I would hear this a lot, oh, I was the CEO of so-and-so, I invented this, I'm a millionaire, or people would often tell me what they have done. Oh, I donated a lot of money to the temple. A lot of times people would come and would come to the discipleship of Buddha. Sometimes they're famous. Oh, that person there, he was an actor in so-and-so movie. And so the praising the self and disparaging others. I have the transmission of so-and-so, you shall praise me. I've seen that before. And the disparaging of others would be, you don't know what I know, you didn't go to college, you don't have a doctorate's degree in Buddhism like I have, how can you know anything? I've seen that too. So what we are asking here, and what this sutra is saying, if you really look at it, is you have to resign all of your accreditations, all of your past, though you may have been a king, a prince, a governor of a state, achieved a doctorate in theology. A disciple of the Buddha, you need to relinquish those things. And you need to, listen to the teachings of the Buddha, not try to put your voice over the teachings of the Buddha. So when you're basically, when you resign, is you're not holding position over another person in the community. To say, I have been a Buddhist disciple now for 25 years. You shall, my words are more than your words. Again, I've heard of all of this stuff. And, when people because as people don't really look at these precepts, they think, I'm going to broadcast, the sixth precept. People see this in the ceremonial form, and because it's just so cryptic and so abbreviated, there's been really no thought. And I'll tell you right now, how many people have actually read these precepts like I'm reading them to you here? Zero. This, even though you may have been a Buddhist for a very long time, I'm probably going to guarantee this is the first time you're hearing this precept spoken like this, or even seeing the true words. And how many people actually would, go as far as to look at the original Chinese and try to decode that even? Probably zero. So that's why I'm doing it here, to help all the Buddhist disciples understand exactly what these precepts mean and where they're coming from. This is not to say that, I'm not saying that, everybody's got it wrong. I'm just saying, hey, look, these are what it says. Maybe we should really take a look at this stuff. Even I have to look at this stuff and say, wow, this aspect of resignation, I've been resigning a lot of things a lot. I could definitely, make some claims about myself, but it won't do anything. Who am I trying to impress? What kind of authority am I trying to put over on you? I would have to resign that authority to be a disciple of the Buddha. That I have I cannot have any authority over another disciple. None, zero. For if I assert authority, I violate this precept, the precept of resignation. I would be pushing you down to make myself look tall. All right, the eighth precept is the precept of compassion. And this is sometimes called the precept of don't be stingy. So a disciple of the Buddha must not be stingy or encourage others to be stingy. He should not create the cause, condition, methods, or karma of stinginess. As a bodhisattva, whenever a destitute person comes for help, he should be giving that person what he needs. If instead, out of anger or resentment, he denies all assistance, refusing to help with a penny, a needle, a blade of grass, or even a single sentence or verse of praise of the Dharma, he instead scolds and abuses that person, he commits a major offense. So, like I said, this is sometimes called the precept of stinginess. Can be, and it often is used to bully alms from the laity. Don't be stingy. Please give, and pass around the begging bowl, and people drop money in it. But in closer examination of the Chinese sutra, we clearly see that this is about compassion. And again, it comes from this authoritative, I would say, stance that that how these were translated in. It's a negative authoritative stance. Don't be stingy. Well, what's the other side of being stingy? The other side is being compassionate. That's a more positive view of this. So this is the precept of compassion. And for the disciples, even the non-disciples who are in need. So if a Buddha disciple shows up without a penny, tattered clothing, and you happen to have the ability to provide for that new disciple, you should, out of your compassion. But the same may even go for non-disciples, people who truly are in need. Furthermore, it's about teaching the Dharma rather than scolding those who commit. This would be to, somebody who does something wrong, even though they are not a disciple. If you have the ability to preach the Dharma at them, you should. This can also go in the modern times where maybe you have a non-disciple who was doing something pretty terrible. Maybe they were a brigand or a pirate or a prostitute, or you have the opportunity to talk to them in the words of the Buddha. Maybe give them advice, because, to be honest with you, a lot of people have heard of the Buddha, but a lot of people have no clue what the Buddha even taught, or they may think that they don't want me. They may have gone talk to Christians or other religions and realize that who they are or their past is not wanted by them. And so they would say the same thing about the teachings of the Buddha, that they would be rejected. But when you provide, when you provide compassion, the compassion doesn't mean to give them everything you own. It means that you listen to them, and you are giving them counsel, but you're also giving them the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings of the Dharma. And that is something that I would say, again, a lot of the disciples of the Buddha have opportunities to do, but they don't. And that might go back to the precept of bravery, and where you're seeing a major offense, a cardinal offense, or even 4 grave offenses, maybe even from people who are not part of the Sangha, from non-disciples, and you're scared. So you say nothing. You don't help. You back off. Oh, that's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem. We'll just sit over here and stay out of the way. That happens a lot, and that's because people don't read these precepts. And they take these precepts. It's a very abbreviated, ceremonial, kind of authoritarian. Oh yeah, yep. Don't kill, don't steal, don't blah blah. They take them and they think nothing of them. And this is where, it's like when I took the precepts. We had a precept class, but the person who taught the class, I think they just glossed over all this. Okay, this is what this means. Don't kill, don't think. And they spoke of these in very trite and very sort of a very ignorant way. Okay, don't steal. That means don't go to the store and take a candy bar without paying for it. Don't be sexually promiscuous. Don't be. And there was a lot of just that kind of talk. It was, I would say, church lady talk, where they were mouthing the words, but they had no understanding. And we never got this far into the precept study like how I'm doing here with you today. Talking about these precepts in a much deeper and much more, really breaking them down and really looking at them. And here's the funny thing: the more and more that you look at these precepts, you can go very deep into them and start to realize, well, this is about compassion, but it's also about other things. It's about courage. It's about bravery. It's about standing up and teaching what the Buddha said to disciples and non-disciples. It's all of that. All right, the 9th precept is the precept of relinquishment. And sometimes this is called to not harbor anger or encourage others to be angry. A disciple of the Buddha shall not harbor anger or encourage others to be angry. He should not create the causes, conditions, methods, or karma of anger. As a disciple of the Buddha, he ought to be compassionate and filial, helping all sentient beings develop the roots of good, non-contention. If instead he insults and abuses other sentient beings, or even transformation beings such as deities and spirits, with harsh words, hitting them with his fists and feet, or attacking them with a knife or club, he harbors grudges, and even with the victims, confesses his mistakes and humbly seeks forgiveness in a soft, conciliatory voice, the disciple commits a major offense. So when we really look at this, and going to the Chinese Sutra, the precept is about relinquishment. For when you harbor something, you're holding it. That's what that is. And if you are encouraging others to hold, you're holding an emotion, you're holding a concept, you're holding a position, you're holding a stance. So that's this precept is about intense emotions, intense clinging, intense attachments, and thus you have to relinquish those feelings, concepts, and notions. Thus the disciple confesses what they harbor to the very thing that brings them this intense emotions, and surrenders and relinquish and surrenders to relinquishment and is no longer harboring what has perplexed them. So this precept again is often just glossed over. Again, people take them in a ceremonial aspect. Do not harbor anger, without really understanding what it means, without giving no thought to it. But it is relinquishment. Anything that brings intense emotions, position concepts, you have to relinquish it. All right, and finally, the 10th precept. This is called the precept of faith. And sometimes this is a lot of times called "do not speak ill of the triple jewels." Well, let's read this. The Buddha's disciple shall not himself speak ill of the triple jewel or encourage others to do so. He must not create the cause, condition, method, karma, or of slander. If a disciple hears but a single word of slander against the Buddha from an externalist or evil beings, he experiences a pain similar to that of the 300 spears piercing his heart. How could he possibly slander the triple jewel himself? Hence, the disciple lacks faith and filial piety towards the triple gem, and he commits and even assists evil persons or those abbreviate to the views of slander of the triple gems. He commits the offense. And this is not about slander, because if you really think, well, who is going to slander the teachings of the Buddha? Who is going to do this? And it's a crude understanding to say, do not slander the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. That's more of a negative authoritative stance. But when we really look at this, and also in the Chinese sutras, how they expound this is about faith. Whereas those who lack faith have doubts about the three jewels and about oneself. So when we look at this particular precept, do not slander the triple jewel. Who would do this would be people that lack faith, people who have doubts, and their doubts are running them. Those doubts are now speaking. People who, I don't know if the Buddha really existed. I don't know where these teachings come from. Heck, it could have just been a couple of guys, in the forest trying to figure out how to make money who wrote this stuff up. Oh, I don't know about these people in the Sangha, man. Some of them are pretty weird people. Oh. All of these are signs of lack of faith. Lack of faith. This is what it's about. So this is the precept of faith. And this is where, again, people, you, me, and when I took these, nobody spoke of this like this. They just said, don't speak anything bad about the Buddha. And again, sometimes the 10th precept was used to browbeat disciples to just go along with the misdeeds of others in the group. Oh, you can't, don't speak bad about the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, even though we're doing bad things. So that's not what it's about. It's again, I come back to faith, and I think this is one of the 10th precept is actually the most important precept of the Bodhisattva. For without faith, the whole thing falls down. Every bit of Buddhism falls down without faith. All right, so in conclusion, as I've gone through the original Chinese sutra, I started to realize that the 10 Bodhisattva precepts are commonly published, or they're incorrect and they're wrongly interpreted. And this may be due to sectarian dogmatism, laziness, and ignorance. I would say mostly just laziness. There are many ways to look at a philosophy: a positive liberating view or a negative authoritarian view. In which I've been pointing out that most of the precepts are in the negative authoritarian view, but when I bring them into a more positive liberating view, we see a totally different version of the precepts emerge that are saying exactly the same thing as the negative authoritative view. But I think that the positive liberating view is much more constructive and instructive than the negative view. So the intent of the precepts is clear for those who wish to ponder each one. The first 5 are kind of prohibitions. The last 5 are aspirations. So we'll go through this again. Don't be a brigand. The brigand is that who is killing people for money, or threatening to kill people for money. They may take hostages for people for money. This is, here in Mexico, this is a big thing. Let's go take hostages, kidnap for money. Or, let's go around the town and tell people if they don't give us alms, we're going to beat them up. Don't be a thief. Joining a thieving ring, becoming a pirate, stealing, even if it's from, the government. Let's not steal from, let's not do that. Don't be a prostitute. Turning the temple into a brothel, becoming a pimp, gaining alms through prostitution. Make a donation to the Buddha and she'll give you a. I've heard of this before, actually. Don't be a thespian. Sometimes this is, thinking, something. You think something is true when it's not, or you're play acting. And this can also be sometimes called the LARPing aspect that we see sometimes in the Zen centers. People will don the Japanese robes, shave their head, and they're kind of being the thespian. They're kind of lying about who they are. They're hiding something beneath all of that. And sometimes they're putting on the air that they have attained something when they haven't. Anybody that has gone to one of the Western Zen centers, I think, is going to agree with me about this precept now. That this being a thespian, LARPing is kind of happening. Don't be a vintner. Let's not turn our temples into a beer hall or brew intoxicants for alms. Oh yeah, let's not make Buddha beer and sell that. Let's not, hey, it's enlightenment in a bottle. All you have to do is pay for it. This is not who we are. We're not beer monks. There actually was a sect of, I think, Benedictine Christianity that would brew intoxicants, and they kind of became famous for that. Certain European monasteries became famous for brewing intoxicants, the beer monks. And you're associating your teachings with intoxication. You're also associating, your intoxication as the teachings. This is not what Buddhism is about. Don't be fearful. That's the be brave. Stand your ground. Stand the ground for others. Stand the ground for those that can't stand their ground for themselves. Don't be arrogant, which is to resign all your worldly attachments. Don't be indifferent. Let's have some compassion. Don't be possessive. Let's relinquish your worldly ways. And don't be doubtful. Have faith. So as you ponder these precepts, you'll come to your own understanding and view of them too, and you'll have more insights, maybe more than I have, or really start to use these precepts to see within yourself maybe some things that you can do to be a better Buddhist disciple. So this is where you want to own the precepts, not just tout them or hold them in a pious manner, which I think the touting them and the holding them and being pious about them is very common. But to be a real Buddhist disciple, you have to own these things. You have to own the precepts as if it was your very own skin and bones. All right. Thank you for staying with me for this very long discussion on the decoding of the Zen precepts. I do realize that many of the things that I have been saying here are probably controversial. Maybe this is the first time you've heard of them. Maybe you have read this before but didn't think much about it. I encourage you to do your own research, do your own study of these. Dig deep. This is what Buddhism is about, is digging deep into not only the Buddhist sutras and the teachings, but into yourself. If it doesn't make sense in the English translations, go to the other translations. There are plenty of online programs these days which will give you all kinds of interesting computer translations from even Chinese, Pali, and Sanskrit now. A lot of the sutras are online, and their English translated forms and their original written forms. People have now taken pictures of the sutra leaves or the original writings that are hundreds of years old, and computers can now pick up on that writing and translate it from the images. There is no excuse anymore to claim ignorance. There's no excuse anymore to say I don't have the materials or I don't know where to go. If you have a computer, you have everything you want, and again, the access to the internet, which says if you're watching this video, you do. You have everything at your fingertips. So be brave. Go for it. All right, thank you very much, and thank you for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe.